The threat of war looms over Niger. Leaders of West Africa held a crucial meeting on Thursday. Their big decision was this: the ECOWAS standby force will be activated. It's like their peacekeeping army. Now, the ECOWAS is a regional bloc in West Africa. It has 15 members, and it has been asking the coup leaders to step down. It's been asking them to reinstate the ousted president of Niger, and the leaders had set a deadline for last weekend. Step down or face military action, that's what they said. The deadline expired, but nothing happened. So this time they're sending a stronger message. They have activated their standby force. Listen to the ECOWAS president.
And you will see from the communique of this extraordinary summit that no option is taken off the table, including the use of force as a last resort.
Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately. Order the deployment of the ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger.
It is a strong statement, but it's also a confusing one. ECOWAS is saying that force is the last resort. At the same time, they've decided to activate and deploy standby forces. You can see how it's confusing. Does activation mean mobilization? If yes, then what does deployment mean? And just to be clear, ECOWAS does have a history of military interventions. In 1990, they deployed soldiers to Liberia. The objective was to end a civil war. In 1997, they intervened in Sierra Leone. The West African troops drove out the military junta there. They reinstated the ousted president. In 2003, they deployed troops to the Ivory Coast. A military rebellion had cut the country into two, so ECOWAS got involved. In 2013, they sent soldiers to Mali. The mission was to retake the northern parts controlled by Islamists. So interventions are not new for them. ECOWAS has done it before. Why are they hesitating this time, though? Because the bloc is divided. There are military regimes in Mali and Burkina Faso too. They support the junta in Niger. Plus, the economic situation is bad. There is already a food crisis in Western Africa. The last thing they need is another war. Having said that, such flip-flops will affect the credibility of ECOWAS. First, they set a deadline for military intervention. That expired. Then they talked about prioritizing diplomacy. Again, failure. And now they have activated the standby force. Frankly, it looks like ECOWAS is running out of options. Where does that leave Niger? The coup leaders have refused to back down. They took power saying they can handle terrorism better. But now the argument has changed. The junta keeps accusing France of destabilizing the country. It's a popular narrative in Niger. It was a French colony in the last century, so blaming France is a popular strategy. But the question is, will it work? Recent examples will embolden the military. There was a military coup in Mali in 2021. The junta is still in power there. Last year, there was a coup in Burkina Faso. Again, the junta could not be removed. So diplomatic pressure has not worked in the past, and the military option appears too costly. The Niger junta is counting on that. They're using the same template as Mali and Burkina Faso. Hold your ground, blame France, and weather the storm. Meanwhile, the ousted president is in fact in more trouble. His name is Mohamed Bazoum. He's been under house arrest since the coup. Reports say the junta has cut food and water supplies to him. The U.S. has voiced concerns about his health.
We have deep concern for him, for his family, for his security and well-being. We've also made clear to the military leaders that we will hold them responsible for his safety and well-being.
Mohamed Bazoum was a Western ally. His ouster is a big setback to the United States and its partners. They needed Niger for stability in West Africa, for anti-terror operations, for development projects, and of course for resources. So with the junta, all of that goes out of the window. What is the West doing about it? They have put their weight behind ECOWAS. And what's crucial to note is this: the support is not conditional on a diplomatic settlement. It is a blanket support to the West African bloc. I guess that includes military intervention as well. Listen to Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
ECOWAS, the organization that brings together West African countries, is playing a lead role in making clear the imperative of the return to constitutional order, and we very much support ECOWAS's leadership and work on this.
The West would very much like to see the junta out, but within Niger, opinion is split. Military leaders have promised the people a lot: a crackdown on terrorism, end to French intervention, more prosperity. It's attractive in a country like Niger. Around 41% of their population lives in extreme poverty. It's fertile ground for coups. But the challenge before ECOWAS is this: if you let one coup slide, more will happen. Just look at the last 3 years. First Mali, then Burkina Faso, and now Niger. You cannot legitimize such power grabs by the military. If you do, you set a precedent. At the same time, it's important to understand why they happen. France's neo-colonial interventions certainly have not helped. All 3 countries I mentioned are former French colonies. Coincidence? I don't think so. Nowhere do people like military coups. So if they're splitting public opinion instead of galvanizing them, questions need to be asked. Speaking of public opinion, a Bollywood film is making a brave attempt to shape it. Some of you may have seen it. It's called Oh My God 2. It's a sequel of the critically acclaimed Oh My God, which released in the year 2012. The themes are different though. The first one challenged organized religion. The second one talks about sex education, or rather, the lack of it. At this point, I must give you a spoiler alert. We will be talking a little bit about the movie's plot. If not, the story does not work. So this is what happens. A boy is kicked out of school. Why? Because he's caught masturbating. You can guess what happens next. The teachers, the principal, everyone blames the boy, as if he's committed some sort of crime. His family thinks the same until they get a reality check. And that reality check is Akshay Kumar's character. He's supposed to be a messenger of Lord Shiva. He convinces the father that the boy is not at fault. The society is. So the father decides to sue the school. The rest of the film is a courtroom drama. I will not tell you how it ends, but I will tell you this. The message is positive and timely. Every Indian teenager should see and absorb this message. Just one problem though, they can't. The film has an adult rating, meaning only people aged 18 and above can watch it. Sums up the problem really. The movie is about why teenagers should get sex education, yet teenagers themselves cannot watch it in India. I know it doesn't make sense. Countries like Oman and the UAE have given this movie a 12+ rating. So children above 12 can watch it in theatres. And these are countries rooted in conservative thought. They ban things for the smallest of reasons, yet Oh My God 2 got a 12+ rating there. I know we give Bollywood a lot of pain for their toxic characters, for their glorification of misogyny, and sometimes for not doing enough. You see, Bollywood is famous for its song and dance culture, not for movies with meaning. For once, it tries to do the opposite and this happens, an adult rating. India, of all countries, needs better sex education. Around 25% of our population is below 14 years of age. 27% is aged 10 to 24. But how many of them have access to sex education? It's almost non-existent at home. And what about schools? Surely the point of schools is to prepare students for everything. In India, private schools are free to choose. They may or may not include sex education. What about public schools? Well, a syllabus was introduced in the year 2005, but guess how state governments responded? 12 of them banned it. They said we won't teach sex education. Today, the ban remains in at least 5 states, the likes of Gujarat, Maharashtra and Karnataka. Why have they done so? Some politicians say sex education is against Indian culture. It's too vulgar and Western. I would ask those leaders to see this film. The movie explains how Indian culture has always had a mature and healthy approach to the subject. The Kama Sutra was written centuries ago. Temples like Khajuraho have erotic sculptures. The West did not make them. The British did not make them. We Indians did. So this conservative, narrow attitude towards sex education is not the Indian way. It's the Victorian way. And that's the point Oh My God 2 makes. It's actually an interesting way to tackle taboos. Challenging them outrightly can be dangerous. You may end up alienating a lot of people. So the film uses religion to justify change. Instead of proving what is right, you're showing what is wrong. It's complicated, but it works. It tells us why we need to have a nationwide conversation about sex education. In 2007, around 85% of young Indians had no access to it. 85%. This leads to multiple problems like unsafe sex, sexually transmitted diseases, sexual violence, child abuse. Around 45% of Indian women get married before the age of 24. 12% of them get married between 15 and 19. This is child marriage. Around one-third of these girls give birth before the age of 19. India has the second highest number of HIV cases in the world. 31% of those affected are between 15 and 29 years of age. So there is a problem. We need to acknowledge it and solve it. Talk about it to parents, to children, to students. In 2018, India's Prime Minister rolled out a new sex education syllabus. It was based on role play and activity. It was supposed to help 260 million teenagers. But you see, in India, education is not just the central government's job. The state can also decide on it. So you need both sides working together. If not, things won't change. I guess what we need is to broaden our outlook. Parents cannot shy away from uncomfortable conversations. If you don't talk to your child, they will resort to unreliable sources of information. As for the censor board, we need bolder decision-making, decisions also based in logic. You clear a movie with a Bhagavad Gita in a sex scene, yet you curb one that talks about sex education for teenagers. What gives? Such actions only prove the point this movie makes. This has been a summer of ferocious weather in the US, with storms, floods, and a devastating heat wave. We've told you all about it. But what's more shocking is how this weather has reached the country's most remote state. I'm talking about Hawaii. It began on Wednesday as a scattered brush fire on the Hawaiian island of Maui. These fires first burned in vegetation, but strong winds fanned them, and within a week, flames spread with alarming speed, blazing through populated areas, leaping across buildings, burning multiple neighborhoods to the ground. Look at these before and after visuals. Homes surrounded by blue waters and lush greenery were left charred, as if on a wasteland. The flames moved so rapidly, some residents jumped into the ocean to escape them.
It got really real when we saw the flames, and I had to think fast. We had to get out. We left our vehicle, and myself, my wife, and our 5 kids, we all got in the ocean. We found a floating board that we hung onto, and we were out there floating. And it was just so surreal, and everything was burning around, explosions, cars blowing up, like embers was flying. We couldn't breathe.
Those who could escape the flames survived, but many were not so lucky. At least 55 people have died so far. The death toll is expected to rise because many people are still missing and thousands have been displaced. This is one of the island's most lethal wildfires. In all likelihood, also its largest ever natural disaster. The town of Lahaina suffered the most damage. This is a historic town in Maui. It was once the capital of the Hawaiian Royal Kingdom. Today it is home to 13,000 residents. Also what's described as the largest banyan in the US. But this once idyllic town was also consumed by fire, and its beloved tree was scorched.
We just had the worst disaster I've ever seen. All Lahaina is burnt to a crisp. It's like an apocalypse.
Well, I actually drove through Lahaina today, and it was to the ground, nothing. Like the whole town was gone. People are very connected to to nature in Hawaii, and that tree is like kind of emblematic of that. And the fact that it seems like potentially it's burned, I think it represents a bigger sentiment of loss.
As residents try to come to terms with the destruction, mass evacuation efforts are underway. US President Joe Biden has approved federal aid for Maui.
Anyone who's lost a loved one, whose home has been damaged or destroyed, is going to get help immediately.
Hawaiian Governor Josh Green has offered some hope. He says it appears as if a bomb went off and recovery will take billions of dollars.
Right now, we're still in the assessment stage. We're still trying to assess the amount of damage, but the road to recovery will be long.
It may take years for Maui to rebuild what's been destroyed. After all, the fires were shocking. And don't get me wrong, they'd be devastating anywhere. But the fact that they happen in Hawaii is especially striking because this is a state known for its lush vegetation and beautiful oceans. It's a far cry from dry lands that are more prone to wildfires. Yet fire threats have been on the rise in the Hawaiian Islands. The area burned annually has quadrupled in recent decades. The rainfall is declining, temperatures are rising, and the islands have become vulnerable to blazes. Experts say this deadly wildfire is only a sign of the things to come. And the explanation is both somber and straightforward. Our planet is heating up, and no place is protected from disasters anymore. Now let's shift our focus to space. Another company has begun trying to reach the stars and trying to make a fortune doing it. British billionaire Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic is open for business. It launched its second commercial space flight yesterday. 3 space tourists went to the edge of the atmosphere. They spent a few minutes hovering above the Earth. Then they came back to gush about their experiences. The space tourists included an 80-year-old former Olympian with Parkinson's disease and the first mother-daughter duo in space. Those two won a lottery for the space flight tickets. It sounds like a feel-good story, doesn't it? And we are happy about these unlikely tourists. But the flight should also have us worried. After Elon Musk's SpaceX and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin, a third billionaire space tourism company is operational. And this industry brings with it a lot of risks for the rest of us. Here's a report.
Another space tourism company has launched, Virgin Galactic. Richard Branson's much-delayed space venture has finally taken off.
2, 1, release.
The company had its first commercial flight on June 29th. That one had scientists on board.
Welcome back to Space Unity.
But the second flight, the Galactic 02, took off yesterday, and it ferried out space tourists. One was 80-year-old former Olympian John Goodwin. He was Virgin Galactic's first paying customer. He bought the ticket 18 years ago, all the way back in 2005. He paid about $250,000 for his seat. Now, all these years later, he finally went to the edge of space. He's also the second person suffering from Parkinson's disease to go to space.
I'm hoping that I instill in other people around the world, as well as people with Parkinson's, that it doesn't stop you doing things that are out of the normal. If you've got something that's some illness that's inflicted you. So I just hope the good comes out of that as far as other Parkinson's people suffering.
2, 1, release.
With Goodwin were Keisha Shahaf and Anastasia Mayers, a mother-daughter duo, the first ever to go to space together. They're also the first people of African-Caribbean heritage in space, so it was another milestone. The pair were lucky with their tickets. They didn't pay nearly as much as Goodwin. They won the tickets in a lottery.
Hi Anna, you and your mother are going to space.
Anna, we won! I'm still up there. I'm not here yet. I'm still up there, and it's just amazing that you can land so smoothly on the runway coming back from space. That was the most amazing. I mean, looking at Earth was the most amazing.
You are so much more connected to everything than you would expect to be. Like, you felt like a part of the team, a part of the ship, a part of the universe, a part of Earth. It was incredible, and I'm still starstruck.
She says she was starstruck. And who wouldn't be? She went to space, the final frontier. The mother-daughter pair were incredibly lucky to get a chance. But how many will get that lucky? How many of us will get a chance to blast off to space because of a lottery? Or will space tourism mostly be a millionaire's hobby? Goodwin paid $250,000 18 years ago for his chance. The first space tourist was Dennis Tito from the US. He went to the International Space Station in 2001 aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Back in those days, he paid $20 million for the experience. Between 2001 and 2009, there were 8 space tourists. All of them paid $20 million or more to go to space. And they were tagging along with astronauts on missions. So, back then, space tourism was a way to subsidize scientific endeavors. that isn't the case anymore. Today, you have 3 billionaires trying to carve out a niche in the space tourism industry. Elon Musk with SpaceX, Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin, and now Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. They all have unique types of spacecraft and the distances they reach are different, but they have one thing in common. Other than during publicity stunts, their passengers have to pay a lot.
Welcome to space.
The prices are usually hushed up, but one SpaceX tourism flight ended up costing the tourists $55 million each. Now you can say it's their money. They should be able to spend it the way they like. But should they be allowed to do it if it can hurt the rest of us? Which it can. Here's how. Research papers have shown that space tourism is a massively polluting industry. If we get constant reminders about how our car emissions are hurting the planet, think of what the rockets are doing. Even private jets don't compare to space tourism pollution. And the worst part is, the rockets can bring back a problem we're actually fixing, the ozone layer hole. These tourist rockets could undo the repairs to the ozone layer, once again showering those of us on the ground with harmful radiation. And for what? So that rich people can pay millions to float about in zero gravity? None of that money is coming to us. Whatever taxes a launchpad country charges, they won't get shared equally around the world. Only the consequences will. While we may be fine with taking risks for scientific study, are we willing to suffer for a millionaire's fantasy? So, until it's regulated and deemed safe for us down below, space tourism may need to be grounded before we all go up in smoke.
Now it's time for Vantage Shot's images that tell the story. Hundreds of hot air balloons took to the skies above the English city of Bristol. The city is holding its annual hot air balloon event, the largest in Europe. In a heartwarming viral video, penguins were seen carrying backpacks. 2 sea turtles were released into the Mediterranean Sea after rehab. And finally, what makes the 11th of August significant? Going back to the year 2003, when NATO took command of Kabul's peacekeeping force, this became the NATO's first operation outside Europe. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Today we have a truly international city.